higher cholesterol levels you have in the absence of inflammation have no role in causing heart disease. Why do some people with high cholesterol levels live long, healthy lives, while others suffer heart attacks in their 40s or 50s? When there is too much VLDL, the process leaves behind a surge of small dense LDL. The deadly trio of high triglycerides, low HDL, and small dense LDL. If most of your LDL is large buoyant, your LDL may look high, but your ApoB stays relatively low. When triglycerides go up, ApoB goes up, and when ApoB goes up, so does cardiovascular risk. Observational studies remind us that high cholesterol without high ApoB or inflammation can sometimes coexist with longevity. If ApoB is the head count of dangerous particles and inflammation is the trigger that sets them off, the big question is, how do we reduce both at once? To maximize health span, we must lower ApoB, keep vascular inflammation under control, and whenever possible, shift the LDL profile towards the safer large buoyant type, not the small dense type. Peace be upon you and welcome back to Men Human. I'm Dr. Haitham Faraj, a certified cardiologist, nutritionist, and a personal trainer. Today we're tackling one of the most important and most misunderstood markers in cardiovascular health, ApoB. You may have heard it called the most accurate predictor of heart disease, but is that really the full story? Here is the bottom line. High cholesterol levels in the absence of inflammation have no role in causing heart disease. And that's exactly what we are going to unpack in this video. We'll look at what ApoB really is, why it matters, and how it interacts with inflammation, and why some people with high cholesterol live long and healthy lives, while others suffer heart attacks in their 40s or 50s. Most importantly, we'll explore what you can actually do to lower your ApoB levels, reduce inflammation, and protect your arteries. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you'll understand why ApoB loads the gun, inflammation pulls the trigger, and your LDL particle type decides how easy the trigger is to pull. Let's start with a question. Why do some people with high cholesterol levels live long, healthy lives, while others suffer heart attacks in their 40s or 50s? The answer lies in ApoB and inflammation working together. Now, what is ApoB? Apolipoprotein B, or ApoB, is a structural protein found on every atherogenic lipoprotein particle, VLDL, IDL, LDL, and even lipoprotein a. Each particle carries exactly one ApoB, which makes ApoB a direct measure of particle number rather than just cholesterol mass. If your ApoB is high, it means you have more of those delivery trucks carrying cholesterol, each one capable of slipping or infiltrating into your artery wall. But it's important to know that there's a context to this. Yes, more ApoB particles increase the probability of infiltration, but infiltration alone does not equal plaque formation or rupture. Those particles only become dangerous when they encounter an inflamed and oxidized arterial wall. That's when the immune system attacks, cells form, and atherosclerotic plaques grow. Let's give a patient example. Consider two patients, both with the same LDL cholesterol levels, 140 milligrams per deciliter. Our first patient, Adam, he has an LDL cholesterol of 140 milligrams per deciliter, an ApoB level of 120 milligrams per deciliter, plus high hsCRP of 3.7 milligrams per liter. He is extremely insulin resistant and loaded with visceral fat. His arteries are inflamed, and every ApoB particle has a high chance of being trapped. For him, ApoB particles act like bullets with a finger already pulling the trigger. Now let's see our second patient, Ali. Ali has the same LDL cholesterol levels of 140 milligrams per deciliter and ApoB, which is borderline high, 90 milligrams per liter, with low hsCRP of 0.5 milligrams per liter. He has an excellent insulin sensitivity, low amount of visceral fat, and no systemic inflammation. The bullets are present, but there are fewer of them, and the trigger is untouched. His short-term risk is dramatically lower, even though his LDL looks identical to Adam's. The bottom line, ApoB tells us how many bullets are circulating, but it's inflammation that pulls the trigger. Without inflammation, the bullets stay in the chamber, So that concludes the higher cholesterol levels you have in the absence of inflammation have no role in causing heart disease. Most people think, even lots of cardiologists think, LDL is a single type of cholesterol particle. In reality, it comes in two main forms. Large buoyant LDL, which are big, fluffy particles that carry more cholesterol per particle. They are less likely to slip into your artery wall and are generally less atherogenic. The second type is the small, dense LDL. These particles are compact, heavy particles that easily penetrate the endothelium, oxidize, and trigger inflammation. These are strongly linked to plaque buildup and cardiovascular disease. Now, why this matters? If most of your LDL is large buoyant, your LDL may look high, but your ApoB stays relatively low because fewer particles are needed to transport cholesterol. If your LDL is mostly small and dense, your ApoB rises sharply, since many more particles are needed to carry the same cholesterol load. More particles equals more ApoB equals higher risk. So the key is not just the amount of cholesterol, it's the type of LDL particle and the ApoB particle count that reveal your true risk. Now we've just talked about the difference between large buoyant LDL and small dense LDL, but the obvious question is what actually determines which type your body makes more of. The answer comes often down to triglycerides and a particle called VLDL, or very low density lipoprotein. VLDL is made in the liver to carry triglycerides into the bloodstream. When triglycerides are high, usually from excess consumption of refined carbs such as sugar, white bread, or excessive insulin resistance, the liver pumps out more VLDL. Each of those VLDL particles carries one ApoB. As they circulate, they are gradually broken down into smaller particles, turning into IDL or intermediate density lipoprotein, then eventually becoming LDL. But here is the catch. When there is too much VLDL, the process leaves behind a surge of small dense LDL. Now, small dense LDL is a problem because each particle carries less cholesterol. To move the small amount of cholesterol, your body ends up making far more particles. And more particles means higher ApoB. That's why people with high triglycerides often look normal on an LDL test, but their ApoB is actually elevated and the risk is much higher than it appears. As I showed in my previous case presentation, we admitted a patient with a massive heart attack. His LDL level was extremely low, but his VLDL and triglycerides were high. This implied that despite the very low LDL number, most of it was made up of small dense LDL. And even this small amount of small dense LDL was enough to trigger a fatal cardiovascular event. This is what we call atherogenic dyslipidemia, the deadly trio of high triglycerides, low HDL, and small dense LDL. It's the metabolic fingerprint of insulin resistance, and it explains why triglycerides are such a powerful driver of ApoB and why ApoB is such a powerful predictor of risk. So the lesson is simple. When triglycerides go up, ApoB goes up, and when ApoB goes up, so does cardiovascular risk, even if your LDL number looks perfectly fine. When we say ApoB is on every atherogenic particle, that doesn't just mean LDL, VLDL, or IDL. It also includes lipoprotein little a or LP little a. LP little a is like LDL with an extra tail called apolipoprotein little a. That tail makes it especially sticky, which means it's more likely to get trapped in the artery wall. On top of that, it interferes with the body's natural clot dissolving system. So elevated lipoprotein little a doesn't just contribute to plaque growth, it also increases the risk of clot formation, which is often the final trigger for heart attacks and strokes. Now, here is the challenge. Lipoprotein little a is almost entirely genetic for most people. Diet, exercise, and even weight loss won't move it much. But there is one important exception: fasting. In my previous video on fasting, I showed evidence that structured fasting can lower lipoprotein little a, making it one of the only natural interventions we know of that affects this stubborn particle. That's why many experts recommend that everyone test their lipoprotein little a at least once in their lifetime. If it's elevated, your baseline cardiovascular risk is higher, even if your LDL cholesterol looks fine and even if your ApoB looks moderate. So the key here is lipoprotein little a is part of the ApoB family, but it's a more dangerous cousin. If your lipoprotein little a is high, you carry extra risk even when everything else looks normal. Now let's connect ApoB to something even bigger: lifespan and health span. Genetic evidence gives us some of the clearest answers here. Mendelian randomization studies, which use nature's random experiments in genes, consistently show that people who are born with lifelong lower ApoB live longer and healthier lives. On the flip side, those with genetically higher ApoB face shorter health span and lifespan, with more heart attacks and strokes over time. The mechanism is straightforward. More particles circulating for more decades means more hits against the endothelium, more inflammation, and more cumulative plaque burden. But this is where the paradox often comes in. We've all heard of stories of people who live into their 80s or 90s with so-called high cholesterol. At first glance, this seems to contradict the genetic data we have. But their survival isn't because high cholesterol is harmless. In almost every case, it's because their ApoB particle count wasn't extreme. Their LDL particle type was predominantly the large and buoyant type, rather than the small and denser ones. And perhaps most importantly, their lifestyles kept inflammation remarkably low. Populations like the Okinawans, for example, thrived despite higher LDL cholesterol levels because they had very low systemic inflammation and metabolically resilient lives. So how do we reconcile this? The truth is, it's never cholesterol alone that matters. It's the particle count. ApoB is the bullets in circulation. It's the inflammation. That's the trigger that decides whether those bullets fire, and it's the LDL particle type. The large buoyant LDL is harder to fire, while the small dense LDL fires all too easily. That's why the synthesis is so powerful. Genetic studies tells us lower ApoB equals to longer life. Observational studies remind us that high cholesterol without high ApoB or inflammation can sometimes coexist with longevity. And the practical lesson for all of us is clear. To maximize health span, we must lower ApoB, keep vascular inflammation under control, and whenever possible, shift the LDL profile towards the safer large buoyant type, not the small dense type. And if I had to condense all of this into one line, ApoB loads the gun, inflammation pulls the trigger, and your LDL type decides how easy that trigger is to pull. If ApoB is the head count of dangerous particles and inflammation is the trigger that sets them off, the big question is, how do we reduce both at once? The science gives us a clear path forward, starting with lifestyle, then escalating with medical tools if needed. First, let's talk about what you can control with your habits. Shedding visceral fat is arguably the single most powerful move. Losing abdominal or visceral fat not only knocks down ApoB particles in your bloodstream, but also lowers inflammatory signals that make your arterial walls vulnerable. If you want an 8-week plan that will help you lose visceral fat, check out this video right after you finish this one, of course. Next, refine the fats in your diet. Replace seed oils or fatty processed meats with natural organic butter or monounsaturated fats and healthy polyunsaturated sources such as olive oil, nuts, avocados, and fish to improve the quality of the LDL particle your body produces and reduce the proportion of small dense LDL, the high-risk ones. Soluble fiber plays a role too. Foods like nuts, psyllium, legumes, and beans act like sponges in your gut, binding cholesterol before it can contribute to ApoB. At the same time, cutting down on refined carbs and sugars prevents insulin resistance. When insulin resistance sets in, your body tends to churn out more small dense LDL, raising ApoB even if total cholesterol levels looks okay. And don't forget the anti-inflammatory side of your plate. omega-3s from fish and chia seeds or flax seeds, berries, green tea, and extra virgin olive oil have compounds that calm inflammation. And let's not forget the power of regular physical activity, improving your sleep quality, and quitting smoking. These play a crucial role in lowering inflammation and keeping your arteries healthy. Combined, these shifts reshape your metabolism so your body stops manufacturing the most dangerous forms of cholesterol particles in the first place. If you want to fully understand inflammation, its causes, and how to lower it naturally, make sure to watch this video right after you finish this one. But lifestyle alone isn't always enough when risk remains elevated. Sometimes because of genetics, family history, or diagnostic findings such as a vulnerable plaque found in CT coronary angiography, for example. Here, medicine comes into play. Statins remains the first-line therapy. They lower ApoB and carry built-in anti-inflammatory benefits. And if you're intolerant to statins or you want to avoid their side effects, bempedoic acid is an effective alternative with solid evidence for reducing ApoB and cardiovascular risk. If that isn't enough, ezetimibe can be added to block cholesterol absorption and further reduce the particle load. For those who need aggressive treatment, PCSK9 inhibitors like evolocumab or newer agents like inclisiran can powerfully reduce ApoB. For high-risk patients, uncontrolled diabetes with overburden of small dense LDL, these agents remain among the most effective tools to lower both ApoB particle count and cholesterol burden. Here is what I want you to walk away knowing. Start with lifestyle changes, lose visceral fat, get your fats right, up your soluble fiber intake, cut the sugar, embrace anti-inflammatory foods. If the risk is still there, escalate medical therapy step by step. Statins or bempedoic acid, then ezetimibe, then PCSK9 inhibitors like inclisiran for folks who need more. But always remember, lowering ApoB isn't enough if inflammation remains high. Only when you calm inflammation do you really disarm the trigger and neutralize the threat. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video valuable, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe to MenTumen for science-backed insights into heart health and longevity. I'd also love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or questions, and let's keep this conversation going. And if you're ready to take action on your health, check out my book, Is LDL Really Our Enemy? Cracking the Cholesterol Code. Inside, I've included a step-by-step 30-day plan designed to help you improve your cholesterol profile, reduce inflammation, and transform your metabolic health naturally. You can find the link in the description below. By the way, in the next video, we'll tackle a topic many of you have messaged me about: how to improve sleep quality. Sleep is actually deeply connected to cardiovascular health, and I'll be breaking down practical strategies you can use to protect your heart through better rest. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Until next time, take care of your health and peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum.